There we are. So did anybody go online and listen to the... okay, how did that come out? Did it come out? Okay, good. You get clear. That's okay. Good, because that was recorded with that device, and it started out over 100 megabytes, and I had to run it through Audacity and crunch it down, and I had to do this and do that, and so this will form it already as a wave, so I should be able to get it uploaded a little bit faster. So we'll see, but I don't know. I've never recorded the full thing with that. So where we left it last week. Let's see. Do we have anybody new here tonight? No. Just want to make sure.
Melissa.
Melissa was here last week.
The kids were new. I think a couple.
Melissa was here. Well.
Last week.
Why don't you go ahead?
No.
I thought you were. You look so familiar. So why don't you?
She looks so familiar.
It's the council meetings. That's what it is. I know I've seen you somewhere. Yeah, I'm just making sure that I'm getting everyone's name and email address because so we can send out the notices to everybody. So where we left it, and I don't think you got one of these. So fortunately, I only have a couple more left. So where we left it last week was we did the introduction, and I got one bit of errata here. So when we got talking, and we were talking about the Edict of Milan, I threw out the date 311. All right, that's incorrect. It's the Edict of Milan was 313. So if you would have went to Milan in 311, you would have got there 2 years earlier. But also
really
there. I know.
You said 318?
No, 313. 313 is actually, and so in the recording, when you hear me mention, we were talking about something, and I think it was Steve had mentioned, well, then it became official religion or tolerated. And I said right, the council, the Edict of Milan, 311. No, that's actually, there was a proclamation of toleration in 311, and I'm probably not saying that right either, but it was in 311, and what they were supposed to do was tolerate the Christian religion, which really didn't do anything. I guess they could kill them guilt-free or something like that. But then with the Edict of Milan, they had to return all the property. So if you read about those, and I'm just kind of rambling on a little bit, if you read about those, and you kind of compare it to what's going on, especially in Russia today, and I've had a discussion with my brother about that, about how, look at the Russian government is supporting the Russian church and all this stuff. And I tried to explain to him, well, you got to remember that for 70 years, the Russian government was stealing from the Russian church, and all they're doing is just restoring what they had before. Well, in 313, with the Edict of Milan, among other things, it restored the property or said that the Roman government had to reimburse them, had to make them whole. So if during those times of persecutions they came by and took property that belonged to the church, to the Christians, they had to give that back or they had to reimburse them. So there is a history there of the government, I guess, making good against the persecuted Christians. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and that just started out because I heard that. When I heard the recording, I'm going, that date doesn't sound right. Then I looked it up and thought it was.
So essentially then by 300 years AD, the Christian persecution had essentially ended.
No, it was winding down, because even after that there were other persecutions into going on close to the mid 4th century. So they still had them, even though you would have like an emperor who would die. And then you'd have another emperor in there, or you would have generally local. All the persecutions, it wasn't where they were being done all over the place and everybody was killed and died. Most of the time, it was enforced more locally. So it'd be the same thing that if Emperor Obama said that Christians will now be persecuted, maybe in the state of Michigan, they go, yeah, okay, if I get the chance, I'll do it. But maybe in the state of Ohio, we know about those people, they would just be killing them wholesale. Or maybe just in a city or just in a region. And so that's how it was even during most of the persecution. So when you think about it, you think about, well, everybody who said I'm a Christian was killed. That's not necessarily the case. If they need an excuse, like with Nero, okay, with the burning of Rome, if he needed an excuse, they were an easy excuse, and they could legally kill them. If they wanted to take over their property, they could legally do that, because they were not a legal religion. And that's something, we don't have a concept of that, but without that legality, without that imperial, I wouldn't say consignment, without that imperial agreement, approval, then really you were persona non grata. So the state religions were the worship of the emperors, right? You would have, when you died, the Senate would declare you an emperor, a god rather, and then you would be worshipped. And that's what everybody was kind of trying to do. So to show your allegiance to the state, you would have to burn the incense or do something to show your loyalty to the state. Now the Christians came back, the Jews didn't have a problem with that, but the Christians did have a problem with that because they said, no, we don't burn incense to the emperor as if he were a god, we burn it to our God, who is the true God. And that's where that came in. So then Christians were branded as being atheists because, well, show me your God. Well, our God is in heaven. So, okay, you're an atheist. Well, how come you pledge your allegiance? Well, because we just don't. We don't do it that way. We're good citizens, but we don't do it that way. Okay, well, then you're a traitor. So all these other things kind of added up because they were kind of stepping out from the norm that you had there. I mean, you think about society today, everybody does their thing, you go along to get along. Well, those are some things that the Christians at that time didn't. And I mean, we can see that even today. That's another sermon. But I mean, when you look at it from the standpoint of what are the Christians doing? What is your reaction to the world, and what is it that sets you apart from the rest of the world? All right? If someone came by and saw you, or just saw you in your everyday life, would they say, that person's a Christian? Would they be able to say that? Not that person is spiritual or something. Would they say, that person is a Christian? Or would they not? And that's the deciding factor. You got to think about that. I mean, it's not a matter of running around and putting on crosses and all this stuff and doing these things that you're trying to let people really know. As you read in the book of Acts, it was that love. It was that love for the brethren and also the love for the other people, even those who persecuted them, that showed that they were Christians. So you get engaged in a discussion about politics or something like that. What is your reaction? You get all blood in your eyes and start kind of railing on about this and that and everything else? Or do you kind of come at it from more detached aspect? Understanding, again, and we'll talk about that a little bit here today, in the topic of exile, that we are just sojourners, right? This is not our home, and that's the way the Christians live. So if you think about that, and think about what sets you aside as a Christian, and think about how the early Christians lived as sojourners, in that land, knowing that this is not our permanent home. So, you're not grabbing with both hands, knowing that we love one another, even those who persecute us, so we're not fighting, yelling and screaming and carrying on. That's the kind of things that set them apart. It wasn't that they necessarily dressed differently. I'm assuming that they probably dressed more modestly than the rest of the population. I'm assuming that they probably didn't go along with a lot of the fads and things like that. But they were people of their times, people of their place, but they were still outside of that time and place because they were Christians. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's a long answer. I'm glad you asked. Sorry. But yeah, but that was, I just wanted to bring that up in case someone listens to it and they go, oh yeah, I heard Schlag say. Anyway, so part of my humility. So we were talking about the first two last week, which were steps 1 and 2. And Melissa wasn't here, but what I asked people to do is in those other 2 columns there, just to go ahead and list a passion and a dispassion. Now, what I want you to base this on is the reading that you did and what you see as a passion or dispassion for each one of these different steps. Because the whole idea here is to try to figure out what we need to do in order to turn that passion into a dispassion, whatever that is. How do we turn that around and better our lives and then climb up to the next rung? And as we stated before, this is all cumulative, right? It's not like I was talking last week, jamming for an exam where you do it, you got it, good, I'm on that step, and that's where I am. It's something that you have to build, and that as you read usually at the end of the chapter, he'll kind of explain and say, well, now you need to complete this rung in order to make it up to the next one. So it's one of those things that any time along there, as we know, you can fall off that ladder, right? When you find that, again, those passions or neglect, suddenly overcomes you, and you find yourself maybe forgetting all the things that we talked about here. So let's
sort of just like fall and be like hanging on just barely, so you don't lose it all completely. You just
I don't know. I think. Swing your legs up.
fling back over.
I kind of see it more as just kind of standing on the rung and not moving up. You ever,
Just stay still.
So you're saying that instead of actually falling off?
yeah. Well, I would say, it's two different things. If you fall off, obviously you gave over to that passion, and now you fell off that rung. Now what do? You climb back up. You say, okay, well, I was on step number 10, so let me just right up there to step 10, and there. It's not, it's not like chutes and ladders or something like that. If you lost that, you have to see, well, did I just lose step 10, or did I lose steps 1 through 9 as well?
Yeah.
What caused me to fall off step 10? Whatever it
Right.
happens to be.
Right.
So then that's the evaluation that you need to do. And so, for me, I was kind of thinking about it like if you ever go to one of those water parks or a swimming pool and there's these kids that are climbing up the stairs, they're like a queue. These kids climbing up the stairs. As long as the kid up there in front of you goes off the end, the next kid, everything just goes. But what happens when the kid gets up at the top and chickens out?
Yeah.
They turn around and there's no way down. It's like you gotta go. And I just kind of think about that. So what happens if you get stuck on that rung? Because and again, it's not a matter of single file. We all go up there. There are people who obviously pass others, and there's others that just kind of stay on those rungs. But I kind of thought about that. So what does that do for the people behind me?
We can knock each other off too.
Yeah, there you go. Probably could, but when you knock somebody off the rung, probably you're taking yourself with them, right?
Right.
Yes.
So, I don't want to get too far into
on a rung than not.
Oh yeah, well yeah, that's true. That's true because if you look at the icon, the alternative is it doesn't look too happy with these demons and stuff grabbing and stuff like that. But I don't want to use that analogy too tortured. But the whole point is that as we're climbing up the rung, and he talks about that too. Was it in the introduction here? See, I've read too many books. One of the two introductions, they're talking about finding a spiritual father when they're discussing that. And they're saying that the spiritual father you should find should be one who will stand on that rung with you, one who will walk up that path with you, as opposed to someone who's going to stand up at the top of the ladder and look down and say, "Yeah, come on up, you're doing fine," or "You're never going to make it. I'll go find me someone." It's somebody who will walk with you up that rung, because hopefully they've had that sort of experience, they've had that knowledge of how to get from rung 1 to rung 2, that they can go ahead and walk that with you successfully, and you can get something out of it, right? As opposed to just it's not a coach, it's not like someone who will stand there on the sidelines and yell at you. It's somebody who's actually with you, walking.
To help you.
Exactly, to help you, because it's not that easy as we read. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about this. So step 1. What was step 1 in the book?
Love of the world, and you put love of heaven.
Okay. So well, yeah. What exactly did he call that first rung? I gotta look it up myself.
Is that detachment?
Okay, detachment. Right. So the first one was detachment, and when we're talking about detachment, what I did was I said, well, the difference between the passion is love for the world, meaning that I cannot detach, I cannot let go of the world, or love of heaven. So that's just kind of how I viewed it. What did some of the other things that you came up with?
I put love of our surroundings.
Okay.
Would be the love of, the surrounding, and the dispassion would be to put myself up on that cross with Christ.
Okay. Good. Actually, I'm sorry. Step 1 is renunciation, not detachment.
Renunciation, yes.
Let's
That's
get
what
the
I'm
right
looking
one.
at,
Yeah,
renunciation.
renunciation was step 1. Step 2 is detachment. But still, so when we look at renunciation, we talked about that as the word says, you renounce the world. So I saw that as love of the world and love of heaven. So what other passions and dispassions did you guys?
I came up with love of self as a passion and love of humanity.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Anything different?
I put for the second one, for number 2, where you got possession and detachment.
Okay.
I put it's owning, always wanting to be like that number 1, having to be in on everything. So it's the owning would be the passion, and for the dispassion would be contentment.
Okay. Now here, if you take a look at when he first starts out, and I don't want to go over this because we got a lot to cover, but he said, derided, mocked, jeered, you must accept the denial of your will. All right? So it sounds like when he talks about detachment, what are you detaching from?
Just the
Yourself.
trappings of the world.
The things of the world, what the will tells you, right? We kind of talked about
you
that.
have
I mean,
this
how should you be? When
Big,
someone
gigantic house, this kind of car, these kind of,
and think about it on a personal level, like we were talking about that. If someone comes by and makes fun of you, what are you supposed to do? Cry. Okay. Turn the other cheek. Well, I thought you're supposed to make fun of them.
Yes, you could, but.
You could, yeah. I mean, you're gonna stand there and take it. What are your friends gonna do? You're gonna take that? You're gonna take her talking about you like that? Stuff like, yeah. But I mean, really, that's what the world is, and that's when
You
you
could talk to the
detach.
person and ask them why they're doing that, so that.
Understood. Is that what the world tells you to do? Let me ask you that.
No.
There you go. That's the
Doesn't
point I'm
matter.
trying to make, because the world is telling you
But
that
doesn't
you
matter.
cannot accept this, that this is unacceptable because of your personhood, your selfhood, your pride, and all these other things. But
You need to talk with them.
You need to talk with them.
Because if you talk with them and you see where they're coming from, maybe you can help them also be able to change their
Maybe.
ways.
And-
Not to do that to others, because they'll realize what the result
Sure.
is of what they're doing.
and also we talked about that in terms of marriage too, right? So, sometimes it helps to listen to the constructive criticism that you might receive.
It does.
But yeah, because your spouse, your loved one is your mirror to reflect back, and you can think, well, I'm doing everything great, and I'm just a great person. Everyone tells me that at work. Everyone tells me that, my neighbors and everything, but they don't really know you, right? Not like your spouse, and they could turn around and say, well. So a lot of times there's that old that old saying that I remember. I don't know where I heard it. They said if someone calls you a jackass once, ignore them. Someone else calls you a jackass, listen to what they say. If 3 people call you a jackass, buy a saddle. And the whole idea is,
You must be doing
something, yeah, wrong or right, depending on how.
That more than one person feels
and
that way.
exactly, and that's what it's saying. Listen to what others say.
You need to examine
Yeah,
yourself to see
Don't
what
not
it is.
not to necessarily accept it for face value, but sometimes others out there, even strangers, might have a better insight in you than you have in yourself. So, anything else on those two?
Just that when that happens, typically your first, if somebody is telling you something, maybe that you do need to hear, whether they're doing it in a way of being, constructive
Right.
criticism or just, being ugly about it. Our first response is almost always, well, you're not, like to think about something about them too,
Right,
like, what are you
right.
doing talking about me? You're whatever.
Yeah, right.
That's pride too.
And yeah,
Exactly.
and I,
Yeah.
when you were saying that, I just remembered this was years ago. I had 2 friends, like in close succession, mention something. And with the first one, I was like that, like, ugh.
Yeah.
And then with the second one, I really started thinking about it, and then I prayed about it, and I realized, oh my, they were right, and so at that point, really, I was thankful that they were that kind of a friend.
Right.
Like there's a proverb that says something like, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend,"
Mm-hmm.
and I was just thankful that they cared enough about my friendship to tell me that, instead of just avoiding me.
There you go.
Because they
Yeah.
were annoyed,
That's a good
with-
point. What
with
is the
that aspect
alternative
of
to
my
having
personality.
to
And
either?
I told them that, and our friendship was, I think, better as a result. And,
Right.
that is something you often don't get to that level in relationships. You just kind of don't really ever,
Right.
you know,
right. Well, those are the
go
people
there.
that you avoid.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. So let's go ahead and talk about step 3, exile. Who wants to read that opening paragraph about exile?
I think Cindy does.
Cindy,
Oh,
thank you.
sure.
How wonderful. You volunteered.
Exile is a disciplined heart, unheralded wisdom, and unpublicized understanding, a hidden life, masked ideals. It is unseen meditation, the striving to be humble, a wish for poverty, the longing for what is divine. It is an outpouring of love, a denial of vainglory, a depth of silence. Yet for all that it is praiseworthy, it requires discretion, since not every kind of exile is good if taken to extremes.
Kind of interesting when he makes that statement. So when we think about exile, and especially for me, and that's probably the passions and stuff that I put on there. I said the dispassion, of course, is exile, but the passion was homesteading. But here what he's saying is it's not so much a physical state. How's he describing exile here? Not so much a physical state.
Detached from the world.
Okay. It's a disciplined heart, unheralded wisdom, an unpublicized understanding, a hidden life, masked ideals. All right. Now, what also? I mean, another word kind of comes to mind when I think about all those words.
To me, it's a form of enlightenment.
Okay.
That's what it says to me.
Okay.
Like spiritual or any intellectual discipline. You've reached that self-awareness, that self-actualization, even you can
Right.
say those kind
Okay.
of things. An emotional intelligence, if you will,
Yeah.
your understanding of your place in the world, but in an unpublicized way. It's something
Right.
that's internal.
There you go.
not external.
Right. And in his opening paragraph here, he says, if you have renounced the world and detached ourselves from worldly ways, then we live on this earth as exiles. Isn't that interesting? So what is he doing? So when you compare that, what is he saying living in the world amounts to?
Well, you're living in the world, but you're not depending on the world for your hopes and
Right,
dreams and
right.
future and, you
Right.
know,
But when you take that and turn it upside down, what he's saying is that to live in the world is to be attached to the world. You're attached to the world. Not in the world, but out of the world. That's where that comes from. Then you're of the world, not just in it. So the exile is that sort of detachment. I think it's one that they've already used. Is that detachment really? But this goes a little bit further, and I like what you said, Bruce, about that inner peace, because it talks about this as a hidden life, masked ideals. It is unseen meditation, the striving to be humble, the wish for poverty, a longing for what is divine. So again, when you exile yourself, all right, it's not necessarily just pulling up stakes and leaving a certain spot. Now that's what the desert fathers and mothers did, right? They pulled up stakes and they went out into the desert. But what he's talking about here, even in the desert, you could still be attached to the world. You could still suffer from the same sins, the same passions that you had back there. So it's not so much a matter of physical location, it becomes a matter of spiritual location.
I had to put that it was on my paper, a pilgrimage with God
Okay.
within yourself.
Right, yeah, it's a pilgrimage. It's going somewhere for a specific purpose. Now, when I read this, what I thought about was the word meek, all right, meek. So what is meek, when you think about that, what comes to mind?
Not putting yourself all out there.
Okay.
You know.
Now, is meek a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah.
From the worldly standpoint.
Oh,
It's
from a
bad.
worldly standpoint, it's
Bad.
not good.
No.
They say the meek shall inherit the earth, but the strong will hold the deed, or something like that. Is whatever.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's kind of what they say. It's like, be as meek as you want, but just realize you're not going to get anything out of it. But then again, if you look at meekness from the standpoint of how Christ described himself, didn't he describe himself as meek? Right? Now, when you look at his life, gentle, meek, yep, it doesn't come off as being very, very meek in some of the different aspects. I mean, he called it the way it was. He confronted the religious leaders, which obviously in that case was a sentence of death, to confront them because they were the people who had that sort of power over your life within that Jewish faith. So he also, we saw him, clear the temple. We saw him, discussing things, confronting things, and confronting people. So when you think about meekness, at least for me, I think the term I heard before was power under control. Power under control. Knowing that you have the power, knowing that you have that capability, but then being able to control it and not use it for I guess, bad purposes, ungodly purposes.
We're in the world, I think people think of it as like a milquetoast kind of guy.
That's
Who's just, under everybody's thumb.
Sure.
And, never can
never soft-spoken.
Yeah,
He's just a doormat.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, there's people who, because of their personality and things, I mean,
But
that's one
not
thing.
what it is.
But no, when we look at meekness from the standpoint certainly of Christ, it's not that way. It's knowing what you need to do, knowing what you need to be, and then being it. And that's where the strong part comes in. We can all sit there and say, well, I need to do this, 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 and this, right? I need to do all these things, but am I doing it? No. Why? Because it's hard, right? If it was easy, everybody would be doing it like they say. So it's hard, and that's the kind of thing when you look at meekness and compare it to somebody. I would say, somebody who is able to know those things and then be able to work towards them is a lot stronger than someone who just kind of goes by and says, I don't buy off of that stuff, and I don't do that stuff. I'm too strong, or I'm too much of a man, or too something to go to church or to worry about all those things. I'm going to get mine while I can. That kind of attitude. I don't know if you want to call it macho, if you want to call it just mean. But I mean, that's not the Christian attitude. It's certainly not the one that was exhibited by Christ. So he talks here, spiritual exile often means that we have very different, sometimes completely opposite values of the world that we live in. Right? Now, what are some of those values that might be in opposition to the world? Again, we're living in the world, so we can't say, well, my opposition is going to work. I want to oppose going to work. Oh no, you got to go to work, right? I'm not going to obey the laws, right? And I've heard people put it like that. Well, those are man-made laws. These aren't the laws of God and stuff like that. I mean, is that right?
No.
No, we're supposed to be good citizens of the country that we live in. We're supposed to obey the laws, right? So where does that come in? Where does that spiritual exile is completely opposite values from the world in which we live, is completely opposite of the values of the world in which we live. What are some of the values that we're talking about here?
Treasure.
Okay, treasure.
Or talents.
Talents and treasure. So when we think about that from the standpoint of what is the big thing? I guess think about that, especially for men. I'll talk about this. Okay, pride. Right.
Be proud.
Sure, be proud.
We're supposed to be humble.
Right. So, but how do you exhibit that humility in such a way that it is still, and again, it talks about here, it goes on and talks about vainglory, all right? Now, what's vainglory? What's vainglory?
Kind of putting yourself on a pedestal.
You just want the
How?
attention.
How
That's
put
it.
yourself
You
on
want-
a pedestal?
Right?
Attention.
Right, but
Yeah.
Self-pride.
He talks
Yeah,
about
so-
it in here about, I gave $1,000 to church. I want a big plaque over the door with my name on it. Or they,
Pat yourself on
Almost
the
like
back.
the Pharisee.
Well, not like the Pharisee, but what you're doing is you're boasting in your
Right.
meekness, in your humility,
Look at me,
right? So what you're
I'm
going to do, so you're going to go
I'm
up there
a
and say, see how humble I am, or see how
I give
nice
so
of a
much
person.
for it. I worked the festival so long, and I'm the hardest worker. I should be,
Right. I should be
praised.
recognized, but
Right.
I do it for the church. And,
Right.
You want the glory.
Right.
Right,
But
and
it's
that's
just
the vainglory. The
like
vainglory.
what you do in secret, God sees
Exactly.
what you do.
Exactly.
False humility.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go. False humility. That's a good word. That's a good way to put it. It's the false humility that you have because you do these things, which are all good. And I mean,
Right,
it's
right.
any those kind of things are good things. But then you got to turn around and say, well, what's the reason behind it? If I'm doing this, if I'm making these sacrifices, and he goes into some of the things where he talks about some of the stuff that the monks would do, which were very extreme things, starving themselves and kind of living in like a tree trunk and all those other things. Some of the things are kind of odd. But what was the whole purpose behind that? Now, if they were doing that for their own betterment, for their own well-being, then that's one thing. And they're not trumpeting to everybody, maybe pick a tree out in the center where everyone can see me and I'm going to go sleep in this tree. But as opposed to doing that secretly, that's one thing. And that's what they mean by vainglory, because that glory that you're trying to get, you're getting that for vain reasons, right? For your own self-pride. Right? So that's the kind of those are the kind of things that he's talking about here that we need to avoid. Like here it says, unheralded, unpublicized, hidden, masked, unseen. It is the striving to be humble, a wish for poverty, a denial of vainglory. But still, you're living in this world, and so you have to still, I guess, do the certain things in order to live. That's why when he talks about taking it to extremes, it would be good if all of us could maybe live in a monastery, or live in like a kibbutz or whatever, where we could constantly pray, we could always be doing the right things all the time. But even then, if you look at those things like in the monasteries, they still have problems. If they didn't, they wouldn't need father confessors in monasteries.
Right.
Well, they still have to overcome all these too. They have to overcome all these
Sure.
passions as well.
Exactly, constantly. And when you're looking at it from the standpoint of this vainglory thing, it does become very tough, because you can take that humility to an extreme, to the point where you're doing it not so much for your own betterment necessarily, but also so that everyone can see that you're doing it, and trying to get that praise, trying to get people to think, oh my gosh, what a humble person, or what a look at him, whipping himself or starving himself or doing all these kind of extreme things. Mm-hmm. That the only reason really for doing that is so that people will notice. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interesting. So that exile is a personal, a spiritual and inner exile that pulls you away from the world. I'm here down near the bottom, I guess it would be the last paragraph. Wishing to appear humble is the worst form of pride. Wishing to appear humble is the worst form of pride. When we have detached ourselves from our sense of self-importance, then we are free to make use of our talents without fear of sin. Therein lies the freedom of detachment and exile. Right? Does that make sense? I mean, kind of lays it right down.
If you're thinking about being humble, then you're not humble.
I think that's, yeah. If you think you're great, you're probably not.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And people will recognize that probably before you will.
One interesting thing about all these steps, though, is that it requires, it's a catchphrase in a lot of business schools, right? Is emotional intelligence. Again, knowing who you are, your place in the world, and having a very good understanding of that. I think that should be I would add another one to the list. Because that's the first thing, in my opinion, humble opinion, you have to have in order to make all the rest of this happen, right? If you are not in some way self-actualized, and I think it makes the journey easy, because you know who you are, you know what your limitations are, you know your place in the world, you have no preconceived or idealized version of yourself in terms of how you're living in the world.
Right. How do you get to know yourself then? So before you would put that wrong, do you think prayer helps you to know that about yourself?
Yeah.
I
mean,
think
I'm asking a question. I'm not really making a statement. I'm just thinking.
I think it does.
That's one way. I think another way too is just experiences in life. What challenges you're faced with, and how you react to them, and how you overcome them. You learn more from your failures than you do from your success. And so I think people who faced adversity in life, frankly, tend to be a little more self-realized, it's my own opinion, than people who aren't, who've given everything to them, and had an easy way in life. And so I guess there can be no joy without suffering. Right? So that's hard.
Right. But so how do you acquire that, though?
I think it's a combination of things. There's no magic bullet. I think through experience and through overcoming obstacles and challenges, I think what's helped me understand life is death. And having experienced death, people we love, when when they're young, not when they have lived.
Right.
Things like that, sickness, illness, and success too, I guess, is a relative way of thinking about it. I don't know. It's just something I was thinking about.
Right. And I guess the question is you said it does, but what does it do to you?
What, self-awareness?
No. All these experiences, these self-awareness. What does that do?
I think you put it in I think it forces you, or at least someone who's interested in thinking about those kind of things, it makes you think about your mortality, your place in life.
Right. And there's a chapter in here, Remembering Death, and Father Gabriel has often said, don't remember death. Never let a day go by or a moment, that the remembrance of death. And that you hit it right on the head, Bruce, because all of those have come face to face with, you think about that,
I just laugh at work sometimes because people get so wrapped up in career and
Yeah.
and what's going on.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I saw someone I love very much die. Nothing that can happen to me in this world will ever match that.
Right.
I'm not afraid of your pressure or your quotas or any of that nonsense.
Right.
Because I've experienced it.
Right.
And
It's, and that's
It's true.
exactly, and what it does is when you remember death, it's very humbling to realize that is that's where we're all going to be, right? When you look at someone there laying in the coffin, I'm going to be there someday. Maybe, hopefully later than sooner, but someday, they're where you are going to be, and that is the real reality of it. And it doesn't matter how rich, how poor, how humble, the point is there you go. So it's that understanding, that realization that life, that death is there, that should keep you humble, because that is the end, at least of this life, and then we got to worry about what's going to happen on the other side. So yeah, I could see that. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go on. You guys feel like moving up a step here?
Yeah, we have
Everybody-
to.
We have to.
We've got 500 steps to go.
I know.
I'm overwhelmed.
You're overwhelmed already.
this is the toughest one.
This is the toughest one? What is it? Well, then Bruce, I'm going to ask you to read it if you don't mind.
Obedience.
See, I got in trouble with it. Obedience is unquestioned movement, death freely accepted. A simple life, danger faced without worry, an unprecedented or an unprepared defense before God, fearlessness before death, a safe voyage, a sleeper's journey. Obedience is the burial place of the will and the resurrection of loneliness. I guess it's not so bad.
But right there, it talks about death freely accepted.
Yeah.
Now that's obedience, is how he's putting that, is obedience. All right? Why? So just reading that paragraph, how do we pull obedience out of is unquestioned movement, death freely accepted, a simple life, danger faced without worry, an unprepared defense before God, fearlessness before death, a safe voyage, a sleeper's journey. Obedience is the burial place of the will and the resurrection of lowliness. Now, how does that all equate? How does that all tie together?
Deacon Mike, I have a question.
Sure.
It must be dense or something.
No.
What does it mean, an unprepared defense before God? I don't understand that.
Well,
Unprepared.
Yeah, when I read that, I thought of it as not trying to make some excuse. I come before God. My defense has been my life.
Mercy.
Yeah, mercy. You come for mercy.
Because I know we pray
But
for
certainly, right.
a good defense
A good defense before the judgment of Christ.
God, and then I remember
but it's an
unprepared.
unprepared defense, as opposed to a good defense before the
I mean,
judgment seat of Christ.
To come as.
I would say, to come as you are, to come as you left. Okay. So I guess, so what I thought about that, it's like, what would you do if someone told you that at this time, tomorrow, you're going to die? What are you going to do?
I'd go to the bank and get all my money and go shop.
You would be prepared, wouldn't you? You would be
No
prepared.
shopping. I thought you said shop.
No shopping. There you go. Okay, well, you got to be prepared. Well,
Good, right? I
Yeah.
get some clothes.
yeah, you don't want to look. Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, the whole thing from an unprepared defense is that you don't have to prepare at the last minute for your defense before God. Your life has been your defense.
This is our
Because
And a
you've
good-
been obedient,
Because you've been
Already
obedient.
Already prepared
Or try.
yourself.
Yeah.
or tried to be.
Try to be obedient, yeah, as best you can. I mean, that's kind of how I see that, unprepared defense before God. Yeah, you want to have a good, because a Christian end to our life, painless, blameless, and peaceful, a Christian ending to our life, and a good defense before your life, your Christian life is the defense.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And again, I'm not trying to strain this and struggle with this.
that helps.
What did somebody else get from the reading of that? I mean, because he's talking about the obedience is the burial place of the will and the resurrection of lowliness. So maybe that would give us a clue. What does that
I
mean?
put for the obedient, I had wrote down, it's the abandonment of our will and,
Okay.
you know, by accepting obedience in that, it's us gaining shielding from God, like a shield.
Okay, in a sense, okay,
A
yeah.
shielding.
But I mean,
In the self-will is, I had put for like in self-will, because I looked at yours and you know how you had wrote self-will to obedience.
right.
And so on my paper, like when I read it, after reading it, I had put for self-will desiring.
Okay.
You know, and so then it's, of course, letting go of all those things that we desire and being able to do everything our way and accepting, you know, a total abandonment of our will, you know, so that we can be obedient to.
Right. And so how would you then say obedience is the burial place of the will?
Humility.
Okay, humility. But I mean, when you're talking about the burial place, what
When
does
you
that?
when you're obedient, there it goes.
There it goes.
It's done.
Exactly.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's
When you're not
that's where the self will
obedient,
goes.
Yeah,
When you're not
your
obedient, you're
own
not-
self.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's all.
That-
It's a complete.
and the resurrection of lowliness. Now, what does he mean by that?
Is that another word
That's-
for being humble?
I guess you could say so.
Is it just that you are now? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So what's happening is they're saying that this obedience. So when you are obedient, and again, he kind of gets into some different things here about obedience. But if you're looking at obedience from that standpoint, if you can give up that will, that's what he means. So you're burying your self-will in your own obedience by being obedient, by doing what others tell you to do. All right.
Well, by
And so,
doing what your
What was
spiritual
interesting to
father
me was
has.
a couple of things that stuck out. Danger faced without worry, and fearlessness before death, a safe voyage, a sleeper's journey. So, I mean, to me, those were interesting things. But so in other words, it's basically the reward is not in this life. So nothing that can happen to me here.
Right. But
I'm surrendering my free will to the obedience of God.
right. But what he's saying here is that, and I like the way he puts it here, a sleeper's journey. Now, what does that mean? A sleeper's journey.
Peaceful.
Peaceful. A safe voyage. A sleeper's journey.
You go through your journey, wherever life takes you. You don't second guess it and question it. It's God's will. Not to the point where you're this maudlin kind of, oh, well, it's God's will. I'll just, you know,
Right.
be in a gunny sack and just sit here and eat carrots all day. You know, is this being recorded?
Yes, it is.
God.
That was Ann Shut, by the way.
Just in case.
Thank you, Ann, for that visual.
Her children are blushing.
I'm telling you what, I'm going to complain. No, I'm kidding.
But when I think about a
That was good,
sleeper's
though.
journey,
Yeah.
I think about like maybe if you feel secure on where you're going, right?
Right.
And it's a long journey.
Right.
What are you going to do? You're going to stare out the window. You're going to grab onto the dashboard or something, or you're going to lay
Just
back.
taking it as it comes.
Yeah, take it as it comes. You're going to
Just
sleep. It's
As if you're sleepwalking, you know, like people get up and they just do stuff without realizing they're doing
Well, I
it.
don't-
Well, this is like you're just accepting God's will.
Well,
and
yeah, but I think I don't think
Taking
it's
it
I don't
as
think
it
it's if you read it, it doesn't sound like you're kind of going
No.
with the flow.
It's not passive.
It's not passive, but what
Right.
it is that comfort, the safe journey,
Right.
the safe voyage. You know
That's what I said,
that you're
you're
safe
shielding.
because of your obedience
And
is
God.
putting you in that position. You don't have to worry about some of the other things that might happen. I mean, look at it from opposites. If you say, okay, obedience is unquestioned movement, disobedience is questioned movement. I'm disobeying. Maybe I'm worrying about which way I'm going because of my disobedience. Obedience is death freely accepted. Disobedience is death.
I'm gonna live forever.
Yeah, live forever. Or unaccepted. I can't accept that. I'm not going to accept. You know, that's.
I don't want to die. Afraid
Yeah,
of dying.
Cryogenics.
What's that?
Hence cryogenics.
It's cryogenic. Yeah. They could pull you out and.
But there
Thaw
is
you out.
that obsession in this contemporary society.
Well,
Rebecca's read an interesting thing with Father John Barrett about our obsession with, you know, even how the funeral service is conducted, this obsession with clinging to life.
Right, right.
And to me, it all, I guess maybe the fearlessness before death is, you know, death is a scary thing. I've turned 54 this year, but I think about death a lot lately. And, you know, it's so, well, it's over half over, so.
Oh my God, what about us? We're over.
I don't mean it to be morose, but.
Becca, up his life
insurance.
insurance.
But, you know, but
you
I
have
take-
more years behind you than you do ahead of you.
Thank God. And so I think that for me, a blessing is that I'm fine with that because, again, my faith, such that it is helps me to realize that and accept it. So that's a real blessing.
Right.
Because so many people go through life scared.
Sure.
Even people who,
Yeah.
you know, frankly are outwardly religious, but yet you know, maybe when my time comes, I'll be different. I'll be the guy going into cryogenic suspension. Rebecca, put me in the freezer.
Right next to the ice cream or
But I'd like to
a
think
pie.
anyway at this point in my life.
That'd be
Right.
So that's
Right.
why this spoke to me.
Right, right. And,
Well,
and what they're, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Deegan. I agree with you, Bruce. I can remember my dear mother, God rest her soul, when she found out she had Parkinson's. And she wasn't a very outwardly religious person, and you know, and she, but when she received the diagnosis, and I'm sure that we all have people we know that have exhibited a lot of real grace with that kind of thing, or a lot of real panic and worry and
denial,
trepidation, and just, oh my God, the hand wringing. But my mother just took it as this was just going to be the way it was going to be. It's not that she didn't go to the doctor or just succumb to this whole thing. She fought very hard, but I think there's a certain amount of obedience that, okay, somehow I have this, and somehow I have to deal with this. So that's, I think, being obedient. And she faced her own death very, on her own terms, actually, to be honest. So.
I remember my grandma, when I went to visit her before her passing, I saw about a month before her passing, and you know, she had been put hospice and she lay there for 29 days. And you know, as soon as I walked in the room, you know, the tears come because you know, somebody you love. And she says to me, "It's okay, Ruthie, I'm ready."
Right.
You know, and she was, had already accepted it, you know. And
Now, when he talks about obedience here, and I think this kind of circles it up here, because I'm looking at a note that I wrote. He makes a point that children are the greatest example of what God wants us to be, as far as obedience goes. Now, what do you think? So, what did Jesus say about little children?
Come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven.
Such is the kingdom of heaven, right? And what does he mean by that?
he didn't say teenagers.
What do you mean by that? Such is the kingdom of heaven, and relating it to children.
Unquestioning acceptance.
Okay, unquestionable acceptance. I kind of think of our oldest one, kind of hard to believe now, but remember we'd walk in the park, and he would see somebody with their hand
Like
walking,
you're just walking along.
and he'd go reach up and he'd grab their hand.
He'd think
and
they
he'd
were
go,
so
no, that's
And
not.
walk along
And
with
walk
them.
along with them, holding their hand. And you're kind of like, well, that's
Because
sweet,
our oldest, that was
but.
our second one. The oldest one had you didn't get
Yeah,
space.
she had space issues.
But he was the opposite. He just had no personal space boundaries.
Yeah, he just grabbed the hand and walked away. Now, when you see that, it's like, oh, how cute. But wait a minute, he's walking away with a complete stranger.
That's how dogs are.
Fortunate-
My dog will go with anyone.
Right.
You know, come on into the house and rob the house.
I'll go with you. I'll show you where the good stuff is.
It's
What
like
do you mean?
my daughter, she would stand at this top of the staircase, like 1, 2, 3 years old, and Paul be somewhere in the house, and she would just jump and say, "Catch me, Daddy." And I would be like, my heart would sink. I'm like, one of these days we're not going to be there when she jumps. She would stand right at the top of the staircase, and she used to jump all the time, and he'd just catch her. And I'll be like, Paul, don't do that with her, don't
Oh,
teach her that.
she didn't
I'm
really
like,
get the
she's
whole
gonna do
setup.
that when you're not here, and I'm not gonna catch her one of these. But she would just jump, and he could be sitting on the couch, and he'd have to get up so fast. I mean, I just
Wow.
cannot believe that.
That's
Or
how
one of us
children-
there,
children
but
can
she
be
just,
that way though, yeah. They really
that
trust,
trusting
really trusted.
Yeah.
was just like, there was never that thought that she could fall, or he wasn't gonna
Right,
catch
right,
her, or
right.
if he didn't,
That's a
somebody
good
else,
point.
she just,
They're always going to be caught. They're always going to be
That's
there.
the word
It's
I
that,
was thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trust of.
just the
Don't
trust.
think
was
about,
just
am I
like-
gonna get dinner tonight?
Right.
Or, you know, are my parents going to take care of me? You know, like how we can worry and doubt sometimes with God. Kids
Right.
aren't like that.
Well, because
They
they
just are
know that
trusting.
there's somebody, they trust that there's somebody to take care of
Bigger
them.
and stronger
But that-
and wiser,
Right.
and they
Still
got
got
it all
that.
under, they got it all handled.
They got it all handled, and all I have
Yeah.
to do is just obey and do my kids' stuff. And that's kind of the same thing that we look at when we look at the obedience too, and we look at our relationship with God. If we come to Him as children, we're coming to Him how? Trusting, right? We're just like that. We know that someone's going to feed us, someone's going to change us, someone's going to take care of us. And if it doesn't seem to matter, right? I mean, kids will sit in the mud puddle and be happy, and
stay in her diaper, they don't care.
they don't care enough. We're the ones who are more bothered by it than they. But
And
that's the
it's
whole.
true.
But there's that kind of trusting just to go ahead and live and to experience that
Right.
and have that faith that there's someone there to take care of you. And that's kind of what we're looking at from the obedience here too, because when we obey, and here he goes into several different things about obedience. Obedience to others, right? Obedience in a marriage, very important. Spiritual fathers, and then it kind of talks about choosing a spiritual father, which is some good stuff. I mean, we won't go all into that. But I mean, when you have that obedience, when you're willing to trust, when you're willing to step out. For adults, it's hard, right? Because we've had the kids and we've had to be responsible for them. We have mortgages, this and that, and everything. So we have all these things that are kind of weighing down on your life that the kids don't have to worry about. But when you come to God with that full trust, with that full abandonment of all these things, obeying Him just because He's God, not questioning those kind of things, and then also, as he explains here too, obeying other people, being able to open yourself up, humble yourself. I mean, for me, every one of these, you can always come back and say, oh, humility, humility, humility. Every one of them is being able to take yourself out of the picture, keep yourself out of the picture long enough to be able to serve somebody else, and then personally grow. Right? I mean, it's not a stagnant thing. These steps are going up. You can sit there if you're not personally growing, if you're not getting something out of it. But all of these things, as you learn from them, as you develop, you're growing as well. A lot of other stuff here on obedience. And then again, he talks about how to choose a good spiritual father, one that will actually climb the steps with you, rather than just stand at the top and I guess yell instructions, which is very important. That's something I do wish that I had or more of here is spiritual fathers, spiritual mothers that are a little bit closer, a little bit more available. Maybe someday we'll be able to have that here in the United States, where you can just go to a monastery that's nearby instead of having
There's
to.
and there's Mother Gabriella, she's down Dormition, which isn't far, Holy Trinity.
Mhm.
Okay. The burnt are there too. I mean, if you're looking, monastery, but like both of them are really, I think, like down to earth, and either one
Right.
will put themselves with you and walk that with you, even though they're at different steps with other spiritual children, they will put themselves there with you and work with you. But of course, you too, when you do your confessions or sit down and talk with them and them get to know you, you have to open up so they can know
Oh,
you,
sure, yeah.
so that they're,
Yeah,
so they can
yeah,
work
it's
with
definitely
you
a
through
two-way
that
street.
stuff too, because a lot of times, if someone isn't willing to open up themselves to somebody, then it's very difficult for them to have, I think, a spiritual father or mother anywhere.
Sure. Well, yeah,
If they're
sure.
going to have
I mean, that's
one
all
or
part of the
other, because
relationship.
either could- yes.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm reading down here at the bottom, and this is what we were talking about. A good spiritual father does not set perched at the top of the ladder, calling down to those below. He descends the ladder to meet his spiritual children at their level and then climbs with them. So I think that's something good to look into as far as spiritual father, spiritual mother. So, any questions on that? So we've gone over 2 steps already. We have about another 15 minutes. I don't know if we want to jump into step number 5.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
Reading through all this, I felt, I can relate to a lot of these things, but something that, for me, is very sometimes difficult, because I guess I'm not very good at my prayer life.
Okay.
And so, I think about the church, and I think about the teachings of the church often, but I don't often, I take the time to be still. It's like I drive all day, so I'm thinking about when I'm driving. So I guess in my own individualized way,
Right.
I'm praying, but not in a, like, Rebecca has a very good prayer life. Well, I just did. She
But
you do, you're disciplined in the church. So anyway, I'm not. I don't have that
right.
as disciplined a prayer. So I would like to suggest that you have a class about on how to pray, because I think some
I could use
people.
lessons of that.
I think it's something, I know I do take it for granted. And I don't really, maybe I'll be the only one attending the class now, but it's something I struggle with sometimes, to
Right.
be still and to be silent. So this is why I'll be stuck on this lap, this rung.
Right.
I need to find the discipline at the time.
Right.
So
Well,
my wife will be waving at me from 4
maybe she'll
I'll
wait,
be
she'll
walking
wait
home.
for you, right?
I'll be walking home. But
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, well, all of this, and we had talked about that the first night. What is prayer? We talked about that. What is prayer? Is it talking to God?
It's communication,
It's being still with God.
It's what?
It's talking to God, but it's also listening.
Listening, right. It's listening. And that's the kind of thing that we need to do. Are we prepared to listen?
So
Now-
what does listening look like to you in prayer?
To me, to be in prayer, listening is to be able to turn it inward and to hear. So I go through my prayers and then sit still for a few minutes, which for me is not that long either. I'm not a great prayer warrior either. But to be able to sit still, do your prayers, and then sit. Now, is it going to be the big thunderclap from above or the smack upside the head? No. But what it is that reflection that comes back to me that I believe is God helping to direct me through based on my prayer requests, based on what my needs were. And sometimes it's not even the things that I'm even asking for, or for the people that I'm praying for. Sometimes it's something different that's completely laid on my heart.
Right.
But I don't hear it. I don't hear voices, all right? I don't hear voices.
No.
But I guess for me, I feel it. Now
It's a discipline, isn't it?
Yeah.
it's all it is. I'll tell you what. I would say that it's probably to start out with at least 90% discipline.
During church on Sunday, I was almost there, and then I was thinking, I looked outside, I often do this because it helps me, and I'm thinking, when's Angela's son going to come and get that other log out of there? That's what enters into my head.
Well, no, but
But that's okay.
It
because
happens to other people too.
Yeah,
I was
everyone
thinking
does.
something that I know helps me personally when we're talking about, what our infants like, and we say they're trusting, but they're also very dependent. They depend on us. So if you apply that to us as adults, as teenagers, a little bit more mature people, if I know that I depend on Sue to pray for me, because I've asked her, I depend on the church to still be standing when I come here. Someone's opening the doors and warming it up and lighting the candles. I'm depending on you to be there in choir, then all that depends on me too. So you kind of take it like sometimes, not like drudgery, but it's a responsibility, and others are depending on me just as I depend on them, and it kind of pushes me, to take that step to be a little more disciplined with the obedience and prayer.
to echo what you were saying, Bruce, I've heard it said that there are certain times in our life when we can be more prayerful, and there's other times in our life. Because I can remember when I was a young mother, here they are sitting here, I couldn't even shower, you know, let alone stand and pray. And I struggled with that. I struggled with being distracted in church. I was never, any mother here knows what I'm talking about. Even the fathers too, of course. I don't mean to single anybody out, but you don't have, I felt like I hadn't prayed for years. And I'm not even going to say, you know, I'm not even going to pretend to say that I'm praying that great anyway, but what I've found has helped is putting Orthodox music in my CD player, in my car, and when and I know you spend a lot of time on the road, a lot of time, it really helps. You just have that, and then when you're in your meeting or you're in your sales call, you've got this music in the back of your head, and you're praying. And I know that the nuns, I know that the people, they're praying for us too. And they have said, I remember one time listening to Mother Gabrielle say, when you can't pray, just rest assured we're praying for you, just like what you have said. So I think what's helped me, I think, is I love my Orthodox music in the car, you know.
Yeah.
I do. So, you know, maybe that might, you know, might help.
Well, I've often, you know, thought about the discipline, because I'm more of a free-form prayer, you know. Seriously, it's just...
That's okay.
I'm
God
just-
knows.
But that's fine, but try, I mean, what I have to force to do is, you know, when I do my prayers in the morning, is to stop for a few minutes, because it's like, I got this much time for prayers in the morning, then I gotta go and do this, but just to stop for a few minutes, and just to sit down, and just be quiet. And you'll find, at least for me, I find that, because for me, I can't have noise, I tried, you know, think of what can, it's just hard for me to do that while I'm driving. Not saying that I couldn't if I disciplined myself, but for me, it's just easier just to sit still. And even just sit still, time yourself. Say, I'm gonna sit still for 2 minutes.
Then my phone will ring into the back.
Are you sitting still? No, and then just try that. And then
I'll
you
try
can,
it.
but that's how, I mean, you think about any other discipline, it doesn't matter what it is. It's like being in the military, all right? You come in, you get a bunch of stupid teenagers off the streets, all right? And all of them are bigger and badder than the next ones.
Some of them are
But you get a bunch of stupid teenagers off the street, believe me. You get a bunch of stupid teenagers off the street, each one of them is bigger and badder than the next one. And you would just be really amazed about this, the whole dynamics. But then, when you have that one person in charge and telling you, this is how you're going to do things, this is what you're going to do, you see a big difference just over a matter of a few weeks, how you can take a bunch of rabble and actually turn them into a cohesive unit. But that's the kind of discipline. It's the tough kind of discipline that you need to do. You need to be willing to be under that discipline. And it's the same thing. I think that's kind of how I like it. Just sit there and just force yourself. Even if you have to stare at your watch, just quietly stare at your watch for a couple minutes and see how that feels. And then try another minute. And then you'll be able to build up that discipline, at least for me, where I can sit there and just quietly sit there and just kind of listen to the quiet.
Bruce, I was just thinking too of an acronym that somebody shared with me many years ago. And I know you said you're more free-form, but it's ACTS, like from the book of Acts, not like Acts that you chop with. And you go, it's adoration, contrition, thanksgiving, supplication. So you start out, and it can be as short or as long as you want. It could be as simple as saying, you know, Lord, I praise you for your goodness to me. Forgive me for, and then, you know, whatever if there was anything, you know, that you can think of, a, you know, mean word that you said to somebody or whatever. And then something that you're thankful for, you know, thank you for my beautiful wife. And then something that you're asking for, you know, please bless Emmanuel in his studies, and, you know, keep him safe from the evil one. You know, it's just, for me, that's helpful sometimes to kind of just have a little bit of a format. So, for whatever that's worth.
It's good.
Yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
When I was at the teen retreat at St. George, Father Bob talked about a still kind of prayer, just taking a few minutes out of your day and closing your eyes and sitting really calmly and saying the Jesus prayer.
There you go.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be out loud, but just in your head and just really kind of calming yourself. And I think personally, it's good to read from a prayer book. That's what I do sometimes, but also, but I think it can get kind of repetitive sometimes, and you get to the point where sometimes you're just reading the words and you're not really internalizing it. And
Right.
I think that kind of stillness is pretty cool too.
Yeah, no, that's a real good point. Because what I find is that I have a lot of the morning prayers memorized. And so what I'll do, and I hate doing this, is sometimes my mind will actually drift, and I will even forget where I am as I'm trying to, and it's just something that, again, discipline myself to be here in the moment. And that's something too that we have a big problem with, is to be right here, right now. Not to be back there, not to be over this way, but to be right here. Something that helps is the icons, but even then, I'll be saying my prayers, and then suddenly it's just like I'm thinking about something, it's like, where did that come from? But, that's the whole idea behind the center prayer, the centering prayer, the Jesus prayer, is to try to turn that in and to deeply focus just on those words. Because with anything, you could sit there, even sitting quietly, and like, oh, there I go, there I go, or I'm back there now. You can't be right here.
Yeah. And that can happen during liturgy too. We're so
Absolutely.
used to what comes next, what comes next.
Yep.
We've got it memorized since our youth, and we're just like,
Relate to
it can be noise.
Yeah, exactly.
If we don't, it's just like, okay, when's communion? Okay, we're about 10 more minutes away, and what am I making for supper tonight? I've got to go to VG's. We all do it, but
It's kind of funny because
Zanshot.
Father Gabriel put that little icon of Saint Peter, falling into the water in the storm, and he puts that back there, and he said it was something that he learned. Someone had taught him to do that, and I thought it was kind of clever. He said, because as you're doing the liturgy, you almost go into autopilot, and you're doing the same thing. You're either kind of going through it, or you're thinking about where you're supposed to be next, or what's supposed to happen next, or is this happening so I can do this? And instead of keeping your eyes on Jesus, on the right thing, you're suddenly focused on the water and the storm around you, and you start to sink.
And Lent's a perfect time for that to happen, because the devil does not want us to fast. He doesn't want us going to church. He doesn't want us listening to CDs in the car. He doesn't want us to be saying the Jesus prayer while we're driving or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Right. And when
Very
he told me that, I said that's a good thing to focus on. So he puts that there so he can remember, because I know sometimes when I'm you start going, and next thing you know, you just and I hate that it becomes almost mindless, but it's just because of that, you can't stay in the here and now. You got to be somewhere else. So that's the big thing. And that's something that can help to be quiet, and to also try the Jesus prayer, to try to center that, but do it right here and right now, and focus on each prayer right now. And don't worry about the next one or the last one, just right now. And see how that could do. See how that could put you back into the moment, and and just have a rope and say, I'm going to do one lap or something like that. However big the rope is. I just say one lap. Just do one time around. That's it. And when I'm done, I'm just going to stop. And then next time say, well, I'm going to go twice around or something. And then that way, that's the cool thing about the prayer rope, is that it's a start and an end.
That's why it's nice to have a spiritual father to guide you in those things, and he'll let you know, if he's with you with each step. Like, if you are to do it, he might have some disciplines do it, others not do it, and he'll say do so many, whatever, and he can help you with that. And it's the same thing, even like when you're in your prayers. I went through the same thing, like doing the morning prayers, and you do them on a regular basis, and you have all the Psalms in your head, and you just kind of going through them, but then you're not staying focused on the words.
Right.
So you make the sign of the cross and try to go back to the part where you remember where you were focused on the word, and go back to that part. Not, you don't necessarily have to go back to the very beginning, but at that part, and try to finish it, and then just finish at least that one, and stop there, because it's better to have been focused than to continue to try to
Right.
complete the whole thing unfocused. You know, and this is, you know, how I've been guided in doing some of those things. Or, you know, if you're doing it and you just lose your price or whatever, you know, make the sign of the cross and just, you know, oh Lord have mercy.
Right.
To bring you back to the state where
Sure.
you need to be. But like also having the Koposkini, like I always keep mine, you know, on me, because like, you know, my spiritual father says, you know, when you're doing something and that and you get out of focus, you know, you can take it and just, even if you just do one and concentrate on the one to get you where you need to be,
Sure, sure, yep.
you know,
Yeah,
so.
but it's little steps, just like ascending the heights. It's not an elevator, it's a ladder, and each step is one at a time. So I'll tell you what. Why don't we go ahead? We'll end there.
My right is here.
Oh, you're right. Okay. So we'll go ahead and we'll end right now. So we left off on step 5, repentance, which is a good place. So why don't we see if we can go ahead and do 5 and 6 next week? You think we can get both of those? Okay. Good. So thank you. Let's go ahead.
Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. It is truly meet to us who obey the Theotokos of the blessed and most pure, the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without defilement you gave birth to God the Word, true Theotokos to magnify you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.